quickly introduce our guest, Mitchell Hora, and then I'll let him introduce himself a little bit further and then talk about his experience. And feel free throughout to chime in with questions. He'll talk a bit at the beginning about his work and experience as a farmer in the Midwest. And also he is the founder of Continuum Ag, which is supporting farmers with data and consulting, I believe, to transition to more regenerative practices, but really eager to hear what his experience has been trying to implement more regenerative practices on his farm, and maybe some of the barriers and opportunities that he sees. But appreciate your time, Mitch, and I'll just turn it right over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ryan. And yeah, thanks everyone for being flexible with the timing here. We wild, too much stuff going on, but it's good. It's all good. This whole space has a lot of momentum. We've got a lot of things happening, and it's just all happening all at the same time. So such is life. So I've got like some things I can kind of show you guys on like what we do, things that we're into, jump in, ask questions. Like, I mean, want to be able to get you guys as much value as we can. And so, cut me off, jump in. This can be just open conversation, and we can take it kind of however you guys want to. So maybe Ryan, you want to let me share screen and I can kind of show some stuff here?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Mitchell, just to like back up for 1 second, I don't know if Ryan put in an email any context about this group or their recent experience, but just so you're in the loop, many of these people who are on the call with us, lovely folks, spent some time last week at Green Valley Farm and Mill during our Climate Farm School course experience. So they spent some time talking about and thinking about regenerative agriculture and soil health principles at a very different scale and context than what you're going to share with us. And so I just wanted to put that out there because I think it could inform some cool questions in the second half about implementing these techniques and practices at various scales and geographies. Midwest, obviously very different than Northern California, but we had a full on-farm experience and it was very enriching.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's a great point. What I'm going to, my lens in this is from the Midwest row crop perspective. My family farm is in Iowa. We farm 700 acres, which in my mind is small. It's below average. Like my average customer would be 1,000 to 1,500 acres. So, for a row crop operation, like we're in Iowa, we're kind of on the smallish side, smaller, below average side. And because of that, we've had to really been able to figure out these soil health things and hone in our cost of production and be smarter because we don't have the expansiveness to be our way to really be able to compete. And yeah, on the mineral side of things, Continuum and Mineral actually worked together last year on some projects. We were discussing some things here this year where we've got our expansive farmer network, and we were able to help provide some of the ground truth data for the models. So we've got our farmer network across 43 states and 20 countries where we're helping farmers document the practices that they're doing. We're helping farmers implement regenerative systems, and some of that data was utilized by you guys to in some of your models. But yes, so everything on our side, very much the large scale row crop kind of angle here. I can kind of bounce around on some stuff, and again, like just chime in, cut me off, or put something in the chat if you want. However you guys want to angle, we can be flexible here. So as mentioned, I think I'm 7th generation on my family's farm. We've been farming here for 150 years. This is a picture from last fall. My daughter's 18 months old here now. We've got baby number 2 will be here in just the coming couple weeks. So that 8th generation, and so much of this for our operation is thinking about that long-term legacy. We're thinking about the next 150 years, not just the next 1 year or the next just couple years. Very much thinking long-term. This is year 150 that my family's been farming here in Southeast Iowa. So really able to see this transition all the way through and stuff. You guys had already talked about these soil health principles, but this is a key spot to kind of start. And I'll keep on the farm stuff, and we can maybe.
Well, it looks like we lost Mitchell. Is he frozen for everybody else?
Yeah, he's frozen for me too.
Okay, let me see if I can.
Sad. Hopefully he can reinvigorate himself.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can send him a quick message. Sorry about that.
Cool. Yeah, no worries. Oh, bounced right on out of here.
Okay, good. Hopefully he knows that and he'll come back.
Yes, yeah, hopefully that will be a nice reboot. Mm. Yay.
Hey everyone, sorry about that.
Worries.
Yeah, my internet just like completely shut down there for a second for some reason. So, but we're back. So as I was talking, really the always start with farmers and understanding these principles coming from Mother Nature, coming from that tall grass prairie system, where in that native system there is minimal chemical and physical disturbance. There's armor on the soil all the time. There's living roots on the soil all the time. Maybe that's perennial systems or cover crops, like what I'm going to show. There's a lot of diversity in natural systems, species diversity. We need to be able to integrate livestock wherever possible, like the buffalo and the rest of the critters that help to build up these soils. The key thing here, though, I think, and a key takeaway out of my talk is this kind of sixth principle of soil health, which is context. You've got to make sure that these practices are not one size fits all. It's going to look very different for the farm that you guys visited the other day versus on my farm. It's very different in North Dakota versus Arkansas versus Iowa versus South Africa or Brazil or wherever. It's all going to be very different. The practices themselves and the implementation themselves, and then the environmental outcomes stuff are going to be different, but it's these principles that are universal. And it's the continual improvement upon the implementation of these principles, which is my definition of regenerative ag. If you are continuing to implement and push further on these principles, I believe you're going down a regenerative pathway. So what that looks like for us, we got to going through like some of these principles, we got to minimize disturbance, because in that soil is all those little critters that's down in that soil. And in Iowa, we've got on our farm, we have a lot of diversity to our soils. We've got really heavy black, very great soils like what you see in this picture. And then we have light, sandy, rocky soils that don't have good organic matter. This soil here, you're seeing very good aggregate structure, that chocolate cake looking structure. And then the white hairs and stuff that you're seeing there, those are fungal bodies that's in that soil. Our soils across the country and in ag systems are very bacterial dominant. And you really know you're getting somewhere with your soil health when you start seeing these fungal systems building in your soil. Those fungal communities are what's able to really start cranking up nutrient cycling and breaking down those crop residues and stuff, and also really working to build up our soil carbon here as well. In 1 teaspoon of healthy soil, there can be more than 8 billion microbes. Okay, in 1 teaspoon of soil, more microbes than there are people on the earth. And those microbes are mostly the same things that we are: hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, like it's the same type of things. They're like something like 50% carbon, 5% nitrogen, 1% phosphorus. These microbes are little fertilizer packets. And as you guys are working on, we need to get our soil organic carbon built up. Well, how do we build up our soil organic carbon? We have to build up our soil organic matter. Organic matter is 58% carbon. Well, how do we build up our organic matter? Organic matter is 90% microbial necromass, dead microbes, microbe carcasses and stuff. That what's left over from those microbes and the cycle of life there. A lot of that leads to that buildup of organic matter. So organic matter is 90% dead microbes, basically. Well, how do we get more microbes? We got to feed those microbes. We have to make sure that we don't just destroy their house all the time. And so that's what we really showcase to farmers. We got to let that get built up. And like in the comment, it's not a one size fits all, and it's a continual journey, a continual path. And we've just been at it for a number of years, but any farmer can continue to make steps towards improvement, even if you've been doing these practices for a long time. This is what it typically looks like on our farm in the spring. This is a cereal rye cover crop is what you're looking at here. And we're planting corn into that cereal rye. And with our corn planter, it leaves kind of a little strip where we've basically ripped that cover crop off to the side. We've got some black soil there for our cover crop to hold on to. Some stuff that you kind of see here also in this picture, there are some different streaks and stuff like that. It looks like this yellow streaks kind of right here. Looks like probably where the fertilizer buggy drove or something drove over that and kind of smashed that down. We've got like a little check strip kind of thing over here on the right hand side along closer to the house. There's some yellow cover crop there. Looks like that was sprayed off early. This was a couple years ago. I don't remember what we were doing, but looks like must have sprayed off some of that cover crop early. Like there's a lot of these different in-field anomalies that are happening here. And these strips and stuff here on this planter, this planter is planting corn every 30 inches. So each one of these strips, each one of these units is 30 inches from the next. What we typically do is we plant our corn into that cover crop, and then usually around 5 to 10 days later, we spray the cover crop and terminate it with a pesticide. So we spray the cover crop with a pesticide. We've got this kind of black strip now for our corn to pop through. And we've kind of got this furrow area that we've got some black exposed soil that can be warmed up. It can dry out. We can let that corn get through. Corn is a wussy. It does not like competition. And corn is a grass. And these cover crops we're planted into are also grass. They can be antagonistic and compete with each other. So that's why we plant our corn and then we terminate the cover crop. Like I said, an average of about a week or so after planting. What you're seeing here is this cover crop then starting to die down. See, it's kind of brown and yellow and kind of getting crispy is what we call it, kind of dying off, decomposing, and we'll return those nutrients back to the soil. But especially from a remote sensing perspective, we've got this little baby corn starting to poke through. And we've got this dying off cover crop that's going to give some interesting signals in our remote sensing. Maybe go through some of this here quick, but soil armor, a lot of farms have been focused on building out that armor to avoid erosion. And that's part of what we're doing, but we also utilize that armor to suppress weeds, help to maintain soil moisture, make sure that our soils don't get too hot and dry. I mean, we're consistently over 100 degrees here in Iowa in the summer. It can be for multiple days at a time, so we want to make sure that our soils don't get too hot. We burn up those microbes. In this picture, it's the exact same field that what we've been showing. You can kind of see, like, especially in this row where my cursor is, little baby corn starting to poke through. This cover crop has been terminated. It's yellowing off, it's dying down, and it's working on decomposing. Our farm is a conventional farm. Okay, this is GMO corn. This cover crop is being killed off with Roundup, which is by far the most used methodology. Now, because of using this cover crop though, to suppress weeds, we've actually decreased our pesticide use by about 75%. So yes, we are using pesticide to do this, and we don't like using Roundup. It's by far the cheapest. It's by far the most effective. It's by far the most widely available, easiest thing for us to utilize. And because of these practices and being systematic about it, we've decreased our use of those pesticides by a significant amount. Okay, good question, Lainey. Okay, on your the question in the chat, doesn't the pesticide kill the baby corn plants too? Because they're GMO, they don't die. Okay, so GMO, genetically modified organism, or genetically enhanced, like where this corn has been bred to be resistant to the herbicide. Okay, so it's got certain traits to it that it's tolerant to the pesticide. And there's multiple different pesticides that it's tolerant to, and different crops, different things like are tolerant to these pesticides. We have some choices there. It's just each one has different levels of effectiveness. There's different pesticides for grass type of weeds versus broadleaf weeds. Roundup is a broad spectrum, so it kills like everything. Kills a wide array of different weeds, but it doesn't hurt corn or soybeans, or there's other crops that also can be resistant to that Roundup. So that's probably the main thing there. There are we've tried to experiment with other herbicides to eliminate Roundup from our system. We know that it's a real possibility that we may have to figure out how to farm without Roundup in the future. And again, Roundup is very, 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 very widely used because it's so cheap and because it's so cost effective. Like, that's why. And there's other pesticides that we're trying, but some of them can hurt our corn. Maybe not kill it, but ding it and set it back. And we are experiencing some of that this year, where we are experimenting with other pesticides that aren't Roundup. Okay, we are trying to figure that out, but a lot of experimenting left to be done. So just some other pictures of that. This is some of our cover crop. We can get huge cover crops on our soybeans, where we plant our soybeans into a cover crop, and we wait a long time, even multiple weeks after planting our soybeans, before we harvest, or before we terminate. So on the soybeans, for example, we typically plant soybeans in mid-April, and we just now this week started to terminate cover crop on those soybeans. So a month later, we planted the soybeans. They're already up and a couple inches tall, probably 5-6 inches tall, and the cover crop is starting to hit maturity. It's 3 to 4 foot tall, and now we're finally using a herbicide pass and able to let these cover crops really grow aggressively. Why I bring some of that up is this picture that you're showing here. The soybeans that are in this are like 10 inches tall down underneath this. From a satellite, you would not be able to see that this is a green growing soybean field. This would look like you have a lot of residue out there. You can see the whitish kind of color of that cover crop decomposing. However, there's soybeans that have been growing in there for almost 2 months. They're just underneath that canopy where they're protected from too hot of conditions. We're holding that moisture in, we're suppressing weeds, all that kind of stuff. Okay, I love the questions. This is great. This is exactly what we needed. Okay, Ming, can we spray before planting? Yes, but we don't like to. And the reason being, let me see if we can bounce around and stuff. Okay, so here's another really good one, actually. Let's show this. Okay, so we like to do what you're seeing here, which we call planting green. Okay, so planting green means that we're planting into a green, growing, living cover crop. We don't like to terminate it early. And the reason for that is if I terminate this cover crop early, now it's starting to decompose and die off, and it can hold in moisture. It can kind of be like a sponge out there. And if I kill the cover crop and then I get a wet spell, I can have real issues with my soil becoming dry enough for me to plant into. And also this planter goes through this it goes through this living cover crop a lot better. Here's a slow-mo video. So at the front side here, you've got these spinning silver wheels. Those are our trash rippers that basically rip and tear the cover crop away from the rest of the row unit. This big wheel is what we call the gauge wheel. It basically controls the depth of the planter. It runs on top of the soil surface. That's why it's a big wheel like that. The corn actually drops out down towards the back here. Then this smaller spinning wheel helps to push the dirt back in. And this big press wheel at the bottom, at the end, just kind of helps to pack it back down a little bit. This black tube coming out the back, there's actually fertilizer being deployed out there right on top of the seed, right before the seed trench gets closed back up. We like to plant green because this system works better when I have a nice green growing succulent succulent cover crop. Just like when you're mowing your yard and it's just able to get a nice even tear and shear. If it's dying off, it can be kind of stringy and noodly, and we can have some major issues. Also, the moisture management, like I said, but also I'm spending money on this cover crop. And I want this cover crop to get me as good a soil health gains as I can, to sequester as much carbon as I can. And if I kill it early, I'm missing out on some of those gains. So that's what we like to plant early. Even though the universities and the government agencies still would recommend that a farm actually spray their cover crop 2 to 3 weeks before planting. I would never recommend that to a farmer in almost every situation. Just not, it's just a waste of an opportunity in my mind. Yeah, net economic benefit on this stuff overall, absolutely. We've been able to decrease our total fertilizer by about 50%. We've done a lot of experiments. We've done a lot of experiments and trials and stuff with this. This actually, I don't know, I suppose that you guys have any of our actual fields, but we've been doing a lot of experimenting and stuff with those experiments, and with the data that we've been collecting. We've been able to cut back on our fertilizer by, like I said, about 50% reduction in our fertilizer. We use a soil test that gives results kind of like this, where we're actually able to measure the biological activity. We're able to measure the active carbon, liquid carbons in the soil. We're measuring the active nitrogens. We're measuring our nutrient availability. And what we found is that as we increase our biological activity, we get better nutrient cycling, and therefore we have to supply less as synthetic fertilizer. And of course, less synthetic fertilizer also then helps to get our biology to work better. We're not throwing it out of whack. So, but we have screwed things up. At the beginning, we lost about $100 an acre, not understanding some of these balances, not understanding how to logistically do this correctly. But what we have observed here, and it's really what my company Continuum Ag does, is we scale the agronomic support. And in my mind, it's like the biggest missing thing with the adoption of regenerative ag at scale. It boils down to two major concerns. One is the logistics. How do I do this? How do I adopt all these practices like what I've been showing that we've done on our farm? How do I transition from a conventional system into using some of these practices? And how do I do it with my equipment, in my climate, in my soils, in my geography? How and what's my market? How am I going to make this work and not screw it up in front of all my neighbors? And how do I not lose the farm? And it's, how do I logistically do it? Also, how do I economically do it? I can't lose money. Like, this is how we make our livelihood. This is a business that we're running here. And in any of you guys' business, you want to actively decide to go lose money for the following year. Like, that's a bad business decision. We have to make sure that we are maintaining profitability, that we are making more money. And you can absolutely do that with regenerative practices over time. What we try to do is help the farmer to at least break even in year one in terms of their previous profitability to now, maintain the same profitability, and in a very short time frame, improve their profitability. Some of that can be overcome with cost share. Carbon is an interesting thing. Some of these decreases in inputs and stuff, but it's a transition period. Too much bare soil and then would heat up too much before the plant's big enough. Okay, yeah. So Lenny, yeah. If you kill it early, you can have some more bare soils. Now it's kind of good you want your soils to warm up in the spring though. So that's why some farmers would kill their cover crop early, or why the universities would recommend killing a cover crop early, is to get rid of that cover, have it broken down, not let it be too big. That way you have more black dirt exposed. You have the sunlight helping to warm up those soils, dry out those soils. Because in April, usually we have cold, wet soils in the springtime. So the better you can get that warmed up and get it going, your corn and soybeans like it more. The rule of thumb is to plant corn when your soils are at least 50 degrees at 4 inches deep. And so we want to make sure that those soils get warmed up. Now we utilize that living cover crop though as a way to help to actively manage the moisture. My big takeaway on this stuff, and the huge thing that has been just the aha moment for me, we have to teach farmers that this cover crop, especially this cover crop, is an offensive management tool. Okay, not defense. What I mean by that is, up to this point, our universities, our government agencies, all this, they've told farmers that they need to plant a cover crop to defend against erosion, defend against water quality problems, defend against potential regulations. It's all defense. And it's very hard to tie dollars of soil saved to the bottom line, because I just don't see it enough. It doesn't directly impact my bottom line profitability. What we teach farmers is this cover crop is an offensive management tool. It's part of my fertilizer program. It's my herbicide program. It's my plantability program. It's my moisture management program. It's my pest management program. It's my carbon building program. It's all these positive outcomes that directly impact my bottom line. And therefore, if it's going to directly get me these gains, I've got to prioritize getting it done and getting it done correctly. I've got to prioritize making sure that it's even, it's consistent. I don't leave gaps and things like that. I got to make sure that's done correctly, or else I'm not going to get those positive gains that I'm trying to get out of my cover crop. And it then incentivizes growers that it's not a like a, oh, maybe I'll plant that cover crop if I get to it. And if I don't, it was just some government cost share money. Who cares? Or yeah, my carbon program is going to give me a slap on the wrist, but who cares? I'll make some excuse. The key is to make sure that it gets prioritized and done correctly. Why is that the recommendation from USDA? It's just easier to have a very risk adverse one size fits all recommendation. Much easier for USDA and for the university to say, if you're planting a cover crop, just kill it 2 to 3 weeks out of planting. It's the most risk adverse, the most simple one size fits all recommendation that they can give to avoid risk and liability and blowback. However, every single farmer that I know who has gone this route, every single one of them plants green, just like what we're showing here. This is our soybean planter planted into this cover crop is cereal rye. It's maybe 20, 24 inches tall. Nothing that crazy. Relatively thick. You're probably looking at 2,000 or 3,000 pounds of biomass per acre out here, maybe 4,000 pounds of total biomass. But having that one size fits all recommendation is just a lot easier, Ted, for these guys. Just be able to put out blanket statements, kill it super early. But for me, it just we're leaving so much opportunity on the table. Planting a cover crop seed is an average of $10 to $15 an acre is usually where it can kind of be. You can get more aggressive and spend a lot of money on cover crop seed, but usually I'm trying to help a grower be in the $10 to $15 an acre type of realm. The university custom rate, or like the average cost of planting a cover crop, is around $18 per acre. So if I've got $12 an acre in seed and $18 an acre in application, I mean, you're talking real money that's being spent out there now on your 1,000 acre farm that you've got now $30,000 invested into this. I don't want to just be pissed away. We want to make sure that we actually get something out of it. So I understand why they do what they do, but for farmers to really be successful and for us to show that ag can actually be a carbon sink and to be able to get these environmental gains, we've got to be able to be more aggressive, and that's where we help them out. Hard time convincing farmers you work with to plant green. It is a mental barrier. It's scary, especially planting into some of this stuff. Like even this picture here, this cover crop here is about 24, maybe 30 inches tall. Some of it. It's some of the biggest cover crop that we have planted corn into. Usually planting corn, it's more like this size. This is like 10-inch tall cover crop. We are very comfortable in planting into a 10 to 12-inch tall cover crop with our corn. This cover crop that's bigger and thicker and a lot more lush and all that, that's a little scary. And we did have some insect problems. We did have some hurdles. It just takes a little bit more management, takes the right advice. But farmers, what we tell them is, hey, plant green, but then kill it like 2 or 3 days later. Plant it, kill it soon after, and you're going to be fine. Okay. And farmers are coming to us mostly because they are ready for that next level. They want to do it correctly. They want to get these soil health gains, and we show them the best way to make sure that gets done. It's much, much easier to start using soybeans going into cover crop. The reason being, okay, corn is a grass and our cover crop is a grass. They can be antagonistic. That cover crop wants that same nitrogen. It wants all those same nutrients and stuff. On our soybeans, the soybeans are a legume. And as a legume being planted into a grass, now we're fostering that principle of diversity. Soybeans can fix their own nitrogen. They don't care if that rye is already tied up a lot of the nitrogen. They're going to fix their own. And we've been able to have really good success because of that. Now we have planted corn into more diverse cover crop cocktails and stuff as well. We've grown different crops on our farm. We've done mustard and barley and wheat and rye. Something really, really interesting for you guys to be thinking about. I showed the picture before where we had the soybeans that were decently tall and that thick mat of dying off cover crop. That's very, very common for our farm and for a lot of our customers. One of the things that we are doing now is not using herbicide at all in the system. We plant our soybeans into the cover crop in the spring, and then rather than terminate the cover crop, we take it all the way to harvest. And we are harvesting cereal rye over the top of soybeans. So you see the cereal rye here that's tall and growing. This is the middle of July. This cover crop of rye was planted in October of the year before. So planted in October, now we are harvesting the rye in July. The soybeans were planted in April, and now they're better than knee high. They're better than knee tall, growing underneath this cereal rye. We are harvesting over the top of the soybeans. So afterwards, it looks just like this. We've basically just given that field a haircut right over the top of the soybeans. And we're utilizing this rye for our own cover crop seed use. There's no market that's good enough to be able to sell this rye into. In Iowa, I have unlimited markets for corn and soybeans. That's why we grow corn and soybeans. I don't have a market for growing a bunch of cucumbers or a bunch of tomatoes or a bunch of even just rye or wheat or oats. And the economics just don't really work out. My land cost alone is $500 an acre. Just my land cost, which in California, that's nothing. But that's where you have your specialty crops and all this stuff that you can justify. We're growing a commodity crop where, for example, if I'm growing just commodity soybeans, say I'm able to get on average 65 bushel the acre soybeans, and I can sell those soybeans for a commodity price of $13 per bushel, my total revenue is $845 an acre. My land cost on my farm is $500. Now, across our entire operation, our average land cost is $250 an acre. But for mine, as I bought a farm in 2017 and paying off the mortgage on it, the land cost is very high. So what we're doing is diversifying our system here, harvesting cereal rye over the top of these soybeans and getting better bang for our buck out of the cover crop that we're growing. But why I bring that up is the how this is going to register on remote sensing is going to be real funky. Like you've got a dying off cereal rye that is going to show a dying off kind of signal, and then you got the soybeans that are underneath that's going to look really, really weird. So there's some of these anomalies we're going to have to figure out how to factor in. Why harvest the rye seeds? So okay, yeah, thanks, Ted, and need to kind of clarify that. So my market for the rye seed is my own cover crop seed use, or other farmers who want to use cover crops. So we've made our own market. Okay, so what I meant by that is there's no commercial market. There's plenty of commercial markets available for corn and soybeans, with pigs, with ethanol, with export markets. There's nobody around me that's actively buying cereal rye.
Can I ask another question? It's really cool that you created a market, and by like not having to buy the seed, you're cutting it and then using it from your own growth. But so if you had this field and this is relating back to something that we saw and talked about a little bit last week with a farmer, very, very small scale, growing sort of different varieties of soybean for more like cultural relevance purposes. And I'm just thinking, like, if you're doing the soybeans in with the rye, and potentially for a couple seasons or something, not spraying pesticides on those fields if you're growing up the cover crop and cutting it rather than spraying it. Is there a market at all, or could you imagine there being one for like organic soybeans, for example? Like, I just don't know who's buying. Yeah, you think there is?
Definitely is already markets for organic soybeans. There's markets for non-GMO soybeans, for food grade soybeans. There are some of those things. We have grown non-GMO soybeans in the past. And we could potentially get to that even in this system, utilizing just some different types of pesticides. And we actually are growing quite a bit I grew some non-GMO corn last year, some heritage heirloom corn, grew some of that last year. We are trying and actively looking at some of these things, just like, for a lot of it, the market is just not as readily available either. And it's just so much. And so part of it being, we have 4 grain bins on our farm. So it was kind of one of those that showed up in one of those pictures before. So on our farm, we've got this grain bin set up back here. So I've got 4 grain bins. One of them holds soybeans and 3 of them hold corn. So that's part of the logistics. If I was going to diversify my system, we got to figure out additional storage. Or I have to market it directly. Like when I harvest it, I've got to go and market it right away. But that takes another person to take it to town right away. Or that takes additional equipment. So there's some logistic things there. The big opportunity that we are chasing, and where I think the opportunity is for farmers to progress this stuff further, is with the what's called carbon intensity. Okay, so what we're really chasing is to be able to quantify the carbon footprint of our farm on an acre by acre and a bushel by bushel basis. Okay. And that's important because my carbon footprint is part of the next guy's carbon footprint. I'm part of their scope 3. I'm part of their supply chain. So I'm part of their scope 3 carbon footprint. And now there are marketplaces being enabled. There's low carbon fuel markets. There's tax credits that are being built out to reward decarbonizing these supply chains. So what we're doing on our farm is we've actually quantified our carbon footprint. And it's actually what our software does, our topsoil software. My process with Continuum Ag is this. A farmer can go to our software and they select the crops that they grow, and they fill out a very simple profile about their management practices. And from that, we can run their carbon intensity score, which again is the carbon footprint per bushel. And with that, we can show them then how to improve that score and how to improve their profitability and provide the agronomic support and recommendation that they need to implement this journey. And we assist them with implementation, practice documentation, third-party verification, and supply chain connectivity.
And do
helping
they
these
get
growers to tap
paid
into.
by the people further up that are buying those scope
That's
3
correct.
reductions? Okay,
That's
got it.
correct. It's all very, very new.
Mhm.
The carbon markets up to this point have been adopt some of these practices, and then we'll create a carbon credit, and we sell the carbon credit over here, and then sell your grain to wherever you've been selling it. What's happening here is that carbon story is going with the grain as a scope 3 reduction,
More
kind of carbon
straightforward.
inset. It's more
Yeah.
carbon insetting versus offsetting.
Yes, I love that term.
So that's really been where this is going. But yeah, so Continuum, we do like soil sampling and fertilizer recommendations. We can quantify those biological parameters and stuff. We can direct measure soil carbon stuff as well with lab analysis. But the main thing is we're scaling the tech support, the agronomic support of how to implement these practices. And how we're growing is we have a wholesale dealer network that we're building out. I'm working with large enterprise level customers like Rabobank and other food and ag and finance companies that are trying to figure out how to scale regenerative systems. We provide the agronomic support at scale and the data management tools.
Mitchell, what do you see as the biggest barriers for more people adopting these practices?
Yeah, I mean, it boils down to those two like risks that I shared at the beginning, the economics and the logistics. So most farmers believe that what they're doing right now is sustainable. Most farmers believe that they are not part of the problem. Most farmers believe that they are doing the best thing for their soil, and because they've been farming for multiple generations, and because they're able to continue to farm the next year, they must be sustainable. They haven't gone out of business, therefore they must be sustainable. Well, the issue is they don't know what they don't know. The best thing that we do when I have a farmer that's in that mindset is I take a shovel full of soil from their field versus a shovel full of soil from a native area on the side of the field, a fence line, the ditch, a wooded area, and I just show them. And I show them, here's your soil and here's what it's supposed to look like. And they smell it and feel it. And there's just no arguing that. So we're scaling that with this carbon intensity score to say, hey, you think you're fine. Well, hey, why don't you plug in your practices here and we'll show you what your actual score is. We'll show you what your footprint is. And we'll show you what the potential would be. And we've built out this toggle tool and a modal where they can play around with what their carbon footprint would do if they added some of these practices. So I think that's those are some of the things that they just can't argue with to help them to overcome that. Other than that, I think a lot of farmers I think the writing is on the wall that farmers are going to have to go more this route, and they get that. They know they're going to have to do more of this type of stuff anyway, decreasing tillage, decreasing their pesticides and synthetic inputs, maybe adding some cover crops and stuff. That's kind of a step two. More and more farmers understand that they're going to need to go this route, but a lot of them are just kind of sitting on the sidelines, kind of waiting to figure out like, how are these markets going to expand? What's going to happen with all these climate smart commodity grant dollars, a couple billion? That's a freaking cluster right now. What's going to happen with these markets? What's going to happen with these tax credits? Like what I was talking about, these 45Z low carbon fuel tax credits. It's just right now, farmers are fine doing what they're doing. Commodity prices are still pretty good. Farmers are making money right now. And the pain of change is more than the pain of staying the same, so until more of these markets get developed and all that, until the opportunity is there, farmers only get one shot a year. And if you change and you screw it up, you've got to wait a whole nother year before you can redeem yourself from this.
This might be a big question to go into fully, but can you talk about how crop insurance and commodity supports play into that, either as a safety net for farmers or preventing them from changing? Or
the biggest thing is, preventing them from being able to change. So like the planting green and waiting to terminate, crop insurance don't like that. Diversifying and like the relay cropping or some of these other crops that we've grown, we've done that with no crop insurance because they don't like that. Crop insurance is designed to be risk adverse, and in their mind, to be risk adverse, it's here's the book, keep to the book. If you're outside the book, we ain't gonna cover you. And a huge restriction there for a lot of farmers. I do think that there's some opportunity to help them to diversify in that manner, to de-risk in that manner. We've just had to start small and experiment, do it on our own with our appetite, able to handle those small incremental changes and then scale it up as we prove that it can work within our system.
And on the commodity support side, sorry, and I'll let you take Laney's question. On the commodity support side, do the direct payments for crops, you said commodity prices are good right now,
Yeah.
But is that also because of the commodity supports, or is it just one or the other?
No, those are completely separate to each other. So actually, with the commodity prices being good, you really don't get any payment support. Those payment supports really only factor in when commodity prices are bad or when there's disaster, because of the nature of how they're set up. So we sign up for these programs and stuff, like everyone participates in the program because like might as well, why would you not? There's no cost, there's no nothing to it. It's just an additional safety net, but we haven't gotten any payments out of these programs in multiple years now. We haven't needed them anyway. I would love to not be reliant on the government for what I'm doing. I would love to not be a burden on the taxpayer. And it's just so much more empowering as a farmer when you can just do it without having to rely on these outside sources and be so susceptible to Mother Nature and be susceptible to policy and governmental changes and be susceptible to these outside forces. Just so much better to be in control and very empowering on the farm. And it really just seeing that, like with farming with my dad and stuff, be able to see him as a, he just turned 60, and being able to see like the changes and stuff that we've been able to implement. Like he's having fun, he's having fun. We have people out to the farm all the time. And it's a great way for us to continue to learn. And even doing things like this for me, like I explain things different in this session than what I've ever done before. And certain tweaks and stuff. I've obviously given the same talk about 400 times, same type of talk, but it helps me to be able to learn, and we need to continue to keep thinking through this. We need more people at the table thinking about how do we enable this to grow and scale. And it all boils down to helping farmers to overcome the logistic and the economic risks. That is what it all boils down to.
Thank you. Actually, and that's a great segue back to, I'll stop with the policy questions, back to Laney's question in the chat.
Yeah. No, and the policy side is interesting. This 45Z thing, the biggest thing with the policy stuff is I think it's going to end up being, how do you farm, document everything that you do, turn that into the environmental outcomes, get it third-party verified, and that environmental outcome, your verified story, goes with your product in the supply chain. I am just completely sold that that's how it's going to be. Today, it's your carbon footprint story, but it'll be your biodiversity, your water quality, all nutrient density, all these things that'll go with your product into the supply chain, and that'll monetarily reward you, because that now my low carbon grain is helping the next guy to meet their low carbon ambitions, and they need to buy my grain and they need to buy my story to be able to use it. And guess what? It ain't free. Not even close, because it costs us real money to collect all this data. I've actually seen a stat, just the cost of data collection alone in farmer time and technology and all that, just the cost of collecting data is $20 an acre. So just the cost of collecting data in a row crop system, $20 an acre. Then you have the cost of doing all these practices that make that data worth collecting. That all costs money. Then you got verification, all these steps. Like, I mean, this is not cheap. So, but yeah, Laney, like definitely opportunity for some of these markets that we can tap into. We actually grew some malt barley for a market like that. The biggest issue with some of those specialty markets is just the scale that we're at. Like, I mean, if we're growing like for craft beers and stuff, like 10 acres of barley goes a hell of a long way in making beer. And that's 10 acres out of my 700-acre farm. And it's just such a small change in some of these markets. Like, we have to have big markets. Like, that's where I'm so interested in what's happening with low carbon renewable fuels, like low carbon ethanol. We can have carbon negative ethanol be a very real possibility in the coming less than 10 years. Very, very real possibility. Carbon negative renewable fuel. So the farming practices themselves, when you fill up your gas tank, you're already offsetting the emissions of that fuel because of how that fuel was produced. That's freaking cool. Okay, so that's, I think, is very interesting. Also, like, same type of thing within the food supply chains, that by these insets and by reducing that supply chain, by the time it actually gets to the grocery store steps or on the shelves, you could have carbon neutral or carbon negative products that you're buying at the grocery store. Like, that is very, very real, and very interesting to be able to see how that can tie together. And as I run the math, it can be huge dollars to the farmer to enable this, but as it trickles through the supply chain, I believe it can have a very, very nominal impact on the end cost of these products to the consumer. Because we know that, like, the consumer talks about wanting sustainability, they really haven't proven that they'll actually pay for it, or low carbon or any of this stuff. And how I see the math working out, when you tie it to the commodity, the farmer cut of that consumer dollar is so minimal to begin with, that how this can work through is can really, really work well. So for example, like, we're looking at our low carbon fuel opportunities to be hundreds of dollars per acre in economic value for our operation and the enabling partners. But as it trickles through to the gas pump, putting gasoline in your car at a 10% ethanol blend, the current standard, it would only increase the gallon of gasoline by 6 cents a gallon to be putting carbon negative ethanol. 6 cents a gallon at the end of the day. Like, it goes up by 6 cents a gallon all the time, up and down everywhere. So, like, it's an additional cost, but we're not talking massive multi-percentage point increases in the cost for some of these transitions to be able to happen.
Well, Mitchell, this has been incredibly informative. We're right at the end of the hour, and I have about 1 million more questions. I can see Hassler clapping here, but I really appreciate your time and working it into your schedule. And it's such a different but valuable perspective than the types of farms that we're normally working with. So thank you for bringing that to us.
You bet. Yeah, look, I mean, keep me in the loop. Let me know if I can help. You can check out our Continuum.ag website. We've got our, like, email list. We do a bunch of webinars. I've got a bunch of additional material on my social media pages. You can search Mitchell Hora or Continuum Ag. There's a ton of stuff out there. My Continuum Ag YouTube page, I've got a bunch of information about some of these the low carbon fuels and 45Z. We're hosting a conference here in Iowa in a couple of weeks. If anyone wants to take a field trip, June 5th, we'll be out here, or hit me up if you're ever in Iowa. I thought there was another thing too. And basically, yeah, I see, we need to be able to scale up the practice verification and stuff. So I think that's where I see big opportunity for what you guys are doing. Like, we can help the farmer to document what they're doing, but being able to easily have a yep, that's all true. Nope, hey, there's something weird going on here. We need to have an additional layer of audit or something like that. Like, that provides some real opportunity, I believe. Yeah, I'll let you guys go.
This has been really awesome. Thank you so much, Mitchell. I've learned a ton, and I really appreciate your time.
Happy to help. Happy to be here.
Awesome.
We'll see you guys later.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.